to Red Effects, the place for newbies, indies, as well as low budgeters. And this week, guys, we're tackling a superhero landing effect. Now, I got quite a few requests for this, so here's just one random one. Renz McGee and a few others asked if we can do a superhero landing using Hitfilm. In order to complete this effect, all you have to do is shoot your footage on a tripod. You have to have your actor jump into the air as high as he or she can go and then land in a superhero-like pose. You also have to shoot a clean plate. Now, it's vital that the camera does not move between the clean plate and your actual superhero landing shot. That's why I would also advise using some beanbags and maybe spreading it over the connecting legs of the tripod, just so we can make 100% sure that the tripod is not going to move in between the different shots. And that covers the footage, but a big part of a superhero landing effect is the destruction element, and that brings me to some very exciting news. For this episode, I've teamed up with ActionVFX, and they've given me a free asset from their brand new, newly released Ground Burst collection that came out just this week. And by me, I mean us, of course, so you can head to the description and download that free element. I've also linked their website down below, but I'll talk more about that a bit later. We're also going to be using their Dust Waves collection, which is already free on their website. I'll leave the link also in the description for that. So download those assets, jump into Hitfilm, and let's get ground cracking. That was good, I admit it. That was a... No? Let's just go. Okay guys, as you can see, I have my footage sitting in the timeline as well as my clean plate underneath it. So let's start with step 1. What we want to do is find the point when we are in the air. So let's head forward and find it. Here. Now I'll go frame by frame until I find a frame that I like. For example, this one. Now I'll head forward a frame, split the clip at that point, and we can turn that off for now. Now what you want to do is trim the remainder of your clip down until your feet are touching the ground and you've essentially begun your landing. Like this. We can then split the clip once again and delete the beginning and end excesses, leaving only our single mid-air jump clip and our landing clip, as well as our clean plate, of course. Okay, now turn that off and your mid-air clip back on. Head to the effects panel and search for the speed effect and then drop that onto your frame. We can then set the amount to 0, so we essentially have a freeze frame. You can then go ahead and zoom in onto your timeline and trim that clip to last about 5 frames. Now comes the tedious part, guys. Select the freehand mask tool and cut yourself out of the shot. It doesn't have to be too precise, but enough. Once that's done, let's turn our landing and clean plate back on. Now let's head to the end of our mid-air clip and position it just above where we land, then turn on keyframing for it. We can then head back to the beginning of our layer and drag it up off screen. Don't forget to turn on motion blur for your layer as well, because that's what sells this part the most. And that's the landing part done, guys. Now for the destruction. At the point of impact, drag the ground burst file from ActionVFX into your timeline and position it under your actor. I want this to start sooner, so I'll just trim the first few frames off of it. Here you're going to have to do some masking. I'm not going to show it because it depends on how you land. For instance, here I have to mask out my foot so it appears that the concrete is beneath it, but you might have to do your knee or something else, etc. All you have to do is duplicate your footage, drag it above the ground burst file, and mask out whatever you want to be on top of it. So I'll just do that quickly. There we go. You may have to keyframe the path as well if you move around a lot. Next step, color correction. Let's drag on the curves effect, and again guys, this part all depends on the surface you film your landing on. For me, maybe I'll just darken it a tad and add a bit of contrast. It all depends on your shot. Okay, next up is dust. Let's drag one of the free dust waves from ActionVFX into our timeline and set the blend mode to screen. As you can see, it has a bit of a hard edge, so let's fix that by selecting the rectangular mask tool and draw a shape over it that cuts off the bottom of the clip. Then we can rack the feather up a bit. Now just like with our ground burst, scale and position it under your actor. Here I'm just going to drop the opacity to 70% just out of my personal preference. Okay guys, the last 2 steps. First, and this is totally optional, I'm going to add some lens dirt to my shot to simulate the dust dirting up the camera's lens. This just makes it more realistic, but you don't have to do it if you don't want to. For that, just drag a lens dirt image in. I got mine from ActionVFX like the rest of the stuff we're using, but you can use whatever you want. I'll then set the blend mode to add and scale and position it where I want it to be. Now turn on keyframing for its opacity just before you land, then move forward, let's say 15 frames, and set it to maybe 60%. You can colorize this using the hue colorize effect, but if you want to know how to do that, I would advise watching my Flash running tutorial, as I don't see why I should repeat the whole process. I'll leave the link in the description. Okay guys, final step. For some realism, let's select all of our layers and make it a composition. I'll call mine Final. Now drop the shake effect onto that comp. We can then set the amount to 0. Move to just before we land and turn on keyframing. Now let's move forward to a few frames after we've smacked down onto the ground and set the amount to 100. Now advance about 2 seconds or so and set it back down to 0. Well guys, do all of that and you should end up with something that looks a bit like this. And that's it guys, how you jump and land like a badass superhero. Don't try it in real life because it really bangs up your knee. I learned that the hard way. Before I wrap this up, I just want to thank ActionVFX once again. They haven't told me to say any of this, but I genuinely believe they have the best stock footage on the internet. They've got fire, explosions, muzzle flashes, as well as smoke, debris, embers, a whole bunch of gun sounds, and a bunch more stuff that is definitely worth checking out at really good prices. So I definitely suggest checking them out if you haven't already. As I said before, I linked their website and all the download links in the description, but I've also linked their YouTube channel, so definitely check that out as well, because there's also some cool stuff going on there. But that's this week's episode landed, guys. You can hit me up on my Instagram and my Twitter right over there. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one.